Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of GDDV 100, Game Theory 1. My name is Kasanas. Guys, in the last videos we talked about the idea of design thinking and we talked about the idea of methodologies. We're going to continue with methodologies today by exploring something called MDA, Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. Alright, let's get started. So, what exactly is MDA? Well, MDA, or Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics, is a design methodology or an analysis tool. I really like to look at it as an analysis tool rather than a methodology. For me, it's more of an analysis tool. But it really allows the designer to explore their game from two particular lenses, from two different perspectives. And it's again, just like any other methodology, meant to help the designer move forward. But it's not only looking at the designers. Up until now, we've been really looking at the designer's point of view. If we've taken into account our design thinking, then yes, we've defined our problem based on a research that we've done, really human-centered research that we've done, and we understand our actual customer, our actual person who's playing our game afterwards. But again, I don't know if that's enough. With MDA, what we do is we look at the final result of our creation from the player's perspective as well as from the designer's perspective. And that's the entire point of it. So originally at a GDC conference, a game developers conference, in the early 2000s, there was an idea, a paper that was really formalized called MDA, Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. And this original paper was based on an original paper. So this paper was based on an original paper called Rules, Systems, and Fun. They took the idea, Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics, and they kind of advanced it. So mechanics are the base component. You have to look at the mechanics as the rule set. So the rules that are involved with the game. Just like we've been talking about in the past and all their other videos, the mechanics are the rules of the game. It's really the what defines what a player can do in a particular game. Those are the mechanics. The dynamics from MDA is the dynamic model used that delivers those mechanics to the player. So the player is going to experience the underlying mechanics through the dynamics. It's really the gameplay, right? That's what it really comes down to. It's the actual gameplay of the game itself. That's what dynamics are. And finally, the idea of aesthetics is the underlying reason a player is playing your particular game. And we're going to take a look at each of these sections as we go forward. Aesthetics, there's 8 official ones, a 9th one that was added kind of unofficially, but I've also identified a few more throughout my time as a game designer. So we're going to talk about all of these things in today's video. And it's really important to understand that MDA really looks at two different perspectives, from the designer's perspective and from the player's perspective. And these two perspectives are complete opposite in nature. The game designer experiences his game design, or her game design, their game design, I should say, experiences their game design through the mechanics themselves. They understand the mechanics. They've created these mechanics, and from those mechanics, they are able to generate the dynamics of the gameplay. That's what they're able to do. And the dynamics of game then ultimately, as far as the designer is concerned, creates the aesthetic of play. So that's the direction they look at it. So they look at it from that direction, starting with the base mechanics, moving through dynamics, and then finally to the aesthetics. Now, from a player's point of view, they're looking at it in the complete opposite way. The player understands the experience they want, and they're able to experience that through the dynamics of play. And the only way they understand the mechanics is by exploring the dynamics. So they understand if they push a particular button, something happens. When they push that particular button, maybe their character jumps, and they're able to understand, okay, well, there's a mechanic associated with this game that's jump. The jump mechanic is associated with this particular game. The only way that the player can ever experience the game is through the dynamics of play, right? So they look at it from the other way. They want a particular experience. They explore the game, the mechanics through the dynamics of play. So they're complete opposite. They're complete opposite views. And the players themselves are really focusing on the experiential gameplay, like what they want to experience. That's what they care about. what they're going to experience, the aesthetics. The designers have to start in the opposite direction. They don't have an experience at all. They're going to create the mechanics that are in turn going to define those aesthetics as far as they're concerned. Now, if we look at this fundamentally opposite view, are there any problems that you might see that may arise from this difference, from coming at it in two different directions? Well, you can't answer me back because we're not in class together. So I will just go on to this part. So yes, this obviously can create a problem. This can create a problem where it can create a ton of problems, in all honesty, but looking at it from strictly a designer's point of view, as an example, the designers themselves will get bogged down in the mechanics. And when they get bogged down in those mechanics and they're not really taking into account whether those cool mechanics they're adding are creating a particular aesthetic, they may not take that into account at all, and they're really bogged down in those mechanics. And they also think that the dynamics of play that are created by these mechanics will always lead to the same aesthetics. And that's not necessarily the case. Let's take a look at a quick example here. If I suggest to you that we are going to create a game together, and how you create it is going to be, you have any way you want to create it, but there are a particular set of rules. I'm asking you to secretly select a number between 1 and X. Each player then can sequentially generate a random number between 1 and X. And if that player's number that they've generated matches the original secret number, then that player loses. That's how the game's going to work. And play will continue, where they loop through the rolling of the die or whatever they're going to do, generating this number. They're going to keep generating a random number until someone loses, and that's the game rules. Okay? Really, really simple rules. Generate a number between 1 and X. Everyone else also generates a number between 1 and X, and the loser is the one that matches the generated number. Okay, so you could build this game if you wanted to really simply. You could simply grab yourself a 6-sided die. You could roll that 6-sided die to generate a number. Afterwards, give a die to each player, and each player rolls a die until someone generates the same number as on the original 6-sided die, right? That meets all of the rules. That is all of our rules done very, very simply. The dynamics of play are really straightforward and very, very simplistic, and we can easily see the mechanics of that through our dynamics of play. Well, here's another example, and I believe this game, I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's called Jumping Jack or Jack Rabbit Flash or something like that. It's a very, very similar game in nature. All right, all of these carrots are stuffed into the rabbit's den. The rabbits push down, and children take turns yanking out a carrot until eventually the bunny pops out of the hole, and the kids are all thrilled. They count the number of carrots they've collected. And that's basically how this game works. Now, it's exactly the same rule set. By pushing down the rabbit's head, you're generating a secret number, which is associated with one of these carrots, and the child who pulls the unlucky carrot causes this thrill as the bunny pops out of its hole. Again, it meets all the rules. And this is probably a more thrilling game than the basic roll your die game, right? There's a little more to this. The experience is far different than the player's experience is far different than the simple roll your die game, right? It's far, far different. Let's take a look at another example. And in this example, this is why I'm glad that you are here watching these videos. And I am glad that you are in school right now and you are creating games. Someone went to school and designed this. Flush and Frenzy by Mattel. And right now you're looking at this thinking like, there's no way this is a real game. It is. This is a real game. So basically how this game works is there's an upper decker poop in a toilet, and kids take turns plunging this little pretend toilet until eventually the poop flies in the air and the children have to try and catch the poop. And the winning child is the one who catches the poop. Now we all know that the child who catches the poop is probably the loser. So it still fits into our exact same rule set, right? Random number generated. The poop's going to come flying out after a certain number of plunges. After the poop flies out, someone wins the game. All right. Now, again, the dynamics here are different. All right. It's exactly the same rule set. But again, the dynamics are different. So it's a similar. And you know what? You can find hundreds of different games that are like this, all based on these same rules. And again, the aesthetics of play are going to be different than the simple roll of the die game, right? There's no real thrill in scrambling to grab something flying pickle poop or whatever that thing is supposed to be. There's no thrill in the simple roll the die 6-sided. This one here is going to generate a different aesthetic. Now finally, let's take a look at this one. Exactly the same rule set. Russian roulette. Got a 6-sided, you got a 6-chambered revolver there, 1 bullet, and the loser is the person who gets that bullet. Exactly the same rule set, different dynamics. Obviously, we're delivering gameplay by passing around. We're allowing experience of the mechanics through different means. And obviously the aesthetic of this is probably competition. We'll talk about what the aesthetics are in a moment, but it's probably competition. Whereas the other ones are more about fellowship, or maybe they're about competition too, but it's more about the fellowship and that kind of thing. Where this one is obviously, Russian roulette is obviously about the idea of competition, right? You do not want to lose this particular game. Same rule set, different dynamics, and a far different experience for each one. Okay, well, what does that mean? What are the aesthetics of play, and how are these generated? How do these different dynamics generate a different feeling within our player? In the GDC paper, Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics, they identified 8 categories of aesthetics, and there are sensation, fantasy, narrative, challenge, fellowship, discovery, expression, submission. There was a 9th one that was kind of hinted at. It was unofficial, and that is competition. Now, sensation are basically games of sense pleasure. So they evoke emotions in the player of some kind. You're manipulating images or sounds, or there's some type of tactile feedback that generates it. So a good example would be horror games. There's the jump scare, when that face suddenly appears and it causes the player to jump. They're looking for that sensation. They're looking for that emotion to be evoked within the game itself. That's why they're playing these horror games. Next is the idea of fantasy, and fantasy is game as make-believe. You are pretending to be someone else. It allows you to be someone else. Instead of sitting here listening to some dude drone on about the aesthetics of play, you could be sitting at a game right now and pretending you are a Viking. Anyway, so role play, RPG games, these are all games that are based in fantasy. Narrative, game as story. People play narrative games because it has a strong underlying narrative point. They want to experience that story. That's the entire reason they are playing this type of game. They want to be involved with the story. They want to be involved with the characters and understand the lore and the information about that world. They want to explore that world very, very thoroughly. So a great example of this is LA Noire. Challenge, game as overcoming obstacle. And this is an interesting one. So it's really about improving. It's really about getting better at what it is you're doing. So a lot of games could be this. Puzzle games, for example, where you are trying to complete some task, or you're trying to defeat some obstacle that's in your way, and you get reward from actually completing the particular task. Some other games that might have other aesthetics could be considered challenging as well. So you're going to notice as we go through that a lot of games you're thinking of right now might have several of these options. But let's say you're playing a Mario game and you're speedrunning it. Well, that suddenly becomes challenge, where it might not initially have been challenge to begin with. Well, Mario is probably always challenge. But as an example, that's what it's all about. Overcoming a particular obstacle and being rewarded for overcoming that obstacle. Fellowship, games as social framework. These types of games are all about the people you are playing with. They're party-style games, they are cooperative games, or any type of multiplayer games where you're interacting with other people. That's really what's about. People are playing these particular games for the social aspect. All right, the social aspect. Now, right now, you might be thinking, okay, well, that means that no single player game could actually be fall into this particular aesthetic, and that's not actually true. You could have a really strong narrative based game, so narrative could be an aesthetic that has fellowship, where you are interacting with NPCs. Have you ever had a game where you've got a character and you love that character so much, and they're in your party, or you're playing some kind of role playing game or whatever, and you've got this NPC that's being controlled obviously by the computer, not by another human being, and suddenly that character dies and you feel this pain this other character's died. You've actually created a fellowship with this NPC character. But for the most part, we're looking at games that are party games and that kind of thing. Great example, Mario Kart. any of the Mario Party games, they're all great. Discovery, so games as exploration. This is all about looking at uncharted territory or discovering something new. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical space. Probably the first thing you're thinking of is it's a physical space, and I've got a map, and I'm moving through the map, and it's showing me different parts of the map. And that's absolutely an example of discovery. And people might be playing that for that particular point, is that they love to explore this world that they have no idea about. But it can also be a game about self-discovery. That also falls into this particular category. So any type of game with a strong moral choice, as an example, is about self-discovery. You're answering questions about yourself, and you are discovering things about yourself that maybe you just didn't know before you answered these questions in this particular game. Next, expression. Games as self-expression. And this is any type of game that allows you to create something, allows you to express yourself in some way. Through art or through sound or something like that you are creating. You're creating it for yourself. So a great example is Minecraft. And again, Minecraft is a funny one because it hits half of these aesthetics. But Minecraft, if you are playing it and you are all about building that representation of a real world bridge, or you're about creating a home for your character that's so beautiful, that's about self-expression. It's an opportunity for you to express yourself through gameplay. Submission. Games as pastime. And this is about, really it's about an opportunity for you to lose yourself. That's what this particular type of game is. Submission. If the aesthetic submission, it's about losing yourself in it. You know, you've got a few minutes, you're sitting on the subway, you're sitting on the bus or whatever, and got a few minutes to play a game, and you just need something to help you get through the day. Well, that's exactly what this is. It's the complete opposite of challenge, really. So it's not about overcoming a particular obstacle necessarily. It's more about just taking the time and doing something. That's what it's really about. So an example is grinding or farming. If you're ever grinding or farming in a game and you're just relaxing as you do so, that's about submission. So again, a great example is Bejeweled, right? You're just filling in all of the parts to make the different other jewels that crunch down into, you know how to play Bejeweled. I won't go through that example. But Bejeweled is a great way. Any of those kind of games like that where you're just kind of doing it for a few minutes and then putting it aside, just kind of taking up some time, that's what submission's all about. Now, the ninth one that we talked about, or that I mentioned earlier, was the idea of competition. And that's really game as dominance. And it's about dominating other players, or dominating over a virtual space, or dominating over a virtual foe. It's all about that. It's about the opportunity for the player to really overwhelm an obstacle, or defeating another player virtually, or another player in real life. So any type of real-time strategy game where you're going about and you're trying to destroy the other team's base, as an example, that's a great example of competition. And those, the first 8 are the ones that were official, and this 9th one was really unofficial. But it's a game that I think that everyone, or an aesthetic that everyone can kind of look at and say, oh yeah, I understand how that could be a reason why people are playing a game. They really like to crush those other teams. They really like that. Now that might fit into competition a little bit. That might fit into challenge a little bit, crushing a particular obstacle. But it's more about dominating. Complete dominance over something, rather than just overcoming a single obstacle. So this brought me to some ideas. As my time in design, I've really come up with 3 additional aesthetics of play, reasons why people are playing a game. And those are exercise, education, and financial gain. And again, these are not something that was included in the original GDC paper. These are just things that I've observed, and reasons why people are maybe playing particular games, or creating a reaction or mood within the player as they're playing. The reason why they're playing a particular game. So exercise, games as physical fitness. These are there's more and more of these out there now, where games, the entire point of this game is for you to become physically fit. There are a ton of games, for example, for the Switch Fitness, or a ton of games that are designed particularly to help you with your fitness. A great example is Zombies Run. Zombies Run is a game that as you run a particular distance, you are collecting goods. You're being rewarded for running a particular distance, or moving a particular distance. And in moving a particular distance, when you're rewarded, you can go back afterwards and build your base up so that the zombies can't get in. Awesome opportunity there for exercise, and it's really driving you forward. And people play this game for that reason. It helps them with their exercise. Games as education. So education, games as education. Again, this is becoming more and more popular, and it's going to even be more popular now with COVID, right? With all of us being stuck at home, a lot of us have little kids, and we are looking for ways to entertain and educate our children. So this is going to become, I think, even bigger in the future. It's already a huge industry. You know, we see these commercials on TV. If you watch television, there's commercials on TV all the time about games your kids can play in order to become more knowledgeable. A great example of this is Prodigy. So Prodigy is a math-based game. It's kind of an RPG where you travel around a world and you're a spellcaster, and by answering math questions, you can fight monsters and creatures from around the world, and you can tame them and collect them like in Pokemon kind of thing. But you have to answer math questions. The only way to cast your spells is by correctly answering math questions. If you get the math question wrong, well, then the monster hits you. If you get the math question right, well, then you hit the monster. So games as education, I think it's going to be pretty big in the future. Finally, financial gain. Games as financial reward. And things that would fall into this type of category would be poker, or any of like the Price is Right, or any of these like game shows you see on TV. People are not going on the Price is Right because the game is so much fun. That's not why they're going in there. They can't wait to spin the big wheel. I think it's Price is Right, you spin the big wheel. Anyway, they're not going on that particular show because the game is so much fun. They're going there because they want to win a boat, or they want to win a trip, right? The only reason they're playing these games are financial reward. So with those additional three, I've added over time. That's something that I've noticed over time. All right, that there's others. There's the other categories. You can probably sit back right now and you can probably identify other things as well that I haven't noticed. I'm sure you can. All right. So anyway, what should be clear though is, after discussing this, and I already gave the example of Minecraft, a lot of these games might fall into several categories. Several categories, right? You might have a game that's challenging and also allows for self-expression, and who knows, maybe you win some money. All of these games might have additional aesthetics that are associated with them. In most cases, you probably want to have one clearly intended aesthetic. You can have multiple that are kind of like secondary aesthetics that are also being offered to your game. And the more aesthetics that you have in your particular game, the more attractive that game is going to be to a larger group of people. But it also becomes much more difficult to create such a game where it's got 15, or all, like, not 15 because there's not that many. It has all 8 of the original categories. It's really difficult to create a game that's like that. All right, so it's super, super important that you understand your aesthetic and the reason why players are playing your game. And that's really what MDA is all about. MDA allows you to go about and do that kind of thing, to explore the game from a player's perspective, particularly from the aesthetics point of view. All right, when you're going through and once you've got kind of the idea of what you'd like your player to experience, it's going to be very important to design the dynamics and the mechanics as well of your game to support that particular aesthetic. If you're adding in dynamics that go against your aesthetic, then ultimately the player's not going to experience the game the way you're hoping they're going to experience it. So once you've got an idea of what those aesthetics, and again, this comes down to design thinking, understanding who your player is and what their actual needs are. So understanding those needs is going to help you design your game. All right, everyone. I hope that was helpful. MDA, interesting stuff. I hope that was helpful, guys. If it was, let me know down below with a thumbs up. And if it wasn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I love to hear your comments, guys. So please, come on by. Tell me what you're thinking. Show me the games you're making. Break down games if you want to. That'd be awesome. Break them down into the different aesthetics. These videos right now are for my students. That's why I'm making these videos. They're for my students at Centennial College. This is an introductory to game theory course where we're exploring all of these ideas. I'm not going to be able to interact with you wholeheartedly inside of the chat and inside of on YouTube, inside of the comments. That's not what this is about. My students are watching these videos, and then we are participating, all of us together, in synchronous discussions, deep dives into these different ideas. All right. I'd love it if you guys took some time, though, and discussed it amongst yourselves inside of the comments. It's a great way of learning. It's a great way of understanding each other. My students, We're going to see you in class. We're going to go through and we're going to discuss all of these ideas in depth. All right? All right, guys. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.